The Galactic Council Hall was filled with laughter. Aliens from different species, dressed in their ceremonial robes, sat around a massive circular table. Some banged their fists. Others covered their mouths, struggling to contain their amusement. The center of attention was a human, Captain Elias Carter. Elias sat calmly, his face showing no emotion as he listened to the mocking voices around him. The reason for their laughter was simple. The last will of King Sci-Fi, ruler of the mighty Draxur Dominion, had been revealed. And in that will, Elias had inherited something unexpected. Princess Velith, the king's only daughter, as his bride. This is absurd. The blue-skinned senator from the Orvani race chuckled. A human marrying a Draxur princess, and not just any princess, the ugly one. More laughter erupted. The Draxur were a reptilian warrior race, proud of their traditions and strength. To them, beauty was measured by symmetry, perfect scales, and battle scars earned in glory. But Princess Velith was different. She was born with jagged, uneven scales, her face marked by a deep scar from childhood, and she was taller than most males of her kind. By Draxur standards, she was considered unattractive. The council members expected Elias to refuse the offer immediately. They believed he would be embarrassed, maybe even insulted. After all, why would a human accept such an inheritance? But Elias remained silent, his piercing blue eyes scanning the room. Then, in a calm, steady voice, he spoke. "I accept." The laughter died instantly. The room fell into a stunned silence. A Draxur noble leaned forward, his green scales shining under the artificial light. "You accept?" he asked in disbelief. "You understand what this means, human. This is not just a joke. If you marry Velith, you become part of our royal family. You inherit the king's political burdens, his enemies, and his responsibilities." Elias nodded. "I understand." Murmurs spread across the hall. Some thought the human was insane. Others believed this was some kind of trick. A senator from the insectoid Skritak race clicked his mandibles. "Why? Why would you accept such an offer?" Elias leaned forward slightly, his voice unwavering. "Because King Sci-Fi was an honorable man. He was my ally, my friend. He trusted me enough to name me in his will. I will not dishonor his last wish." Velith herself was not present at the meeting, but she was watching from a hidden chamber, observing the council's reaction. Her golden eyes narrowed. She had expected Elias to reject her immediately. After all, she had spent her entire life being told she was undesirable, unworthy. And now, a human, someone with no political reason to accept, had willingly agreed to the marriage. She clenched her fists. What game is he playing? Meanwhile, the council continued their debate. Some members tried to convince Elias to reconsider. They promised wealth, land, and diplomatic favors if he walked away. But Elias refused every offer. Finally, the High Chancellor of the council, an elder with pale, wrinkled skin, spoke in a serious tone. "Very well. If you insist, then so be it. You will travel to the Draxur homeworld and meet your bride. But know this, human, many will not welcome you. Some will see you as an invader, an outsider. Be prepared." Elias simply nodded. "I always am." As the meeting ended, he stood up and walked out of the council chamber, his posture steady and confident. The whispers followed him, but he ignored them. He had made his choice. Little did he know, this decision would change the fate of humanity in the galaxy forever. Elias Carter stepped off the transport ship onto the surface of Draxur Prime, homeworld of the mighty reptilian empire. The sky was a deep shade of red, and towering black stone buildings rose high into the air. Massive statues of legendary Draxur warriors stood on either side of the landing platform, their fierce expressions carved into the rock as a reminder of the Empire's strength. The air smelled of metal and fire, a sign of the never-ending forge work that powered their war machines. The Draxur were not just warriors. They were conquerors, builders of civilizations, and masters of combat. And now, Elias was about to enter their world, not as an enemy, but as the future husband of their princess. A group of heavily armed Draxir soldiers stood in formation, their dark green and bronze armor gleaming under the alien sun. At the center of them was Princess Velith, the woman he was supposed to marry. She was taller than him, standing at nearly 7 feet. Her scales were a mix of deep emerald and bronze, though jagged scars ran across her face, remnants of old battles. Her golden eyes were sharp, filled with suspicion. Unlike the nobles who mocked her, she carried herself with pride, like a warrior who refused to bow to anyone. Elias approached her calmly, ignoring the murmurs of the gathered crowd. He could feel their eyes on him, watching, judging. Velith crossed her arms. "You are the human who has accepted my father's will." Her voice was deep and powerful, carrying the weight of her people's traditions. Elias met her gaze without hesitation. "I am." She studied him for a long moment, then scoffed. "Foolish, you could have walked away. You could have taken the riches the council offered and left this place behind. Why did you come?" Elias smirked slightly. "Because I don't run from challenges." The Draxir warriors around them let out amused growls, as if they had just seen something interesting for the first time. Velith's eyes narrowed slightly, but there was a flicker of something else: curiosity. Before she could respond, a loud voice interrupted them. "This is an insult to our people." A heavily armored Draxir warrior stepped forward. His scales were dark red, his fangs bared in anger. This was Lord Sarnath, one of the most powerful nobles in the Empire and Velith's cousin. The idea that a weak, soft-skinned human would be given the honor of marrying royal blood is a disgrace. Sarnath growled. His claws twitched at his sides, as if itching for a fight. Elias remained calm. He had expected resistance. "Then challenge me," he said simply. The crowd went silent. Velith's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked her reaction. Sarnath let out a deep, guttural laugh. "You? Challenge me? Do you even know how we settle disputes, human?" Elias nodded. "By trial of combat." The warriors around them rumbled in approval. The Draxir respected strength above all else. If a human was foolish enough to fight, they would not stop him. Velith took a step forward. "This is unnecessary," she said, her voice quieter this time. "You do not need to prove anything." But Elias shook his head. "I'm not proving anything. I'm making sure they understand that I belong here." Velith stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back, giving him space. Sarnath grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Very well, human. I will enjoy crushing you." The battle arena was a massive stone pit surrounded by towering walls. The audience gathered quickly, eager to witness what they believed would be a humiliating defeat for the human. Elias stood in the center, rolling his shoulders. He was dressed in simple combat gear, light armor, no weapons. The Draxir fought with their claws and fists, and he intended to match them. Sarnath stood opposite him, his massive frame blocking the sunlight. "You should beg for mercy now, human," he sneered. Elias only smirked. "Let's get this over with." A loud gong echoed across the arena. The fight had begun. Sarnath charged, moving faster than a being of his size should. His clawed fist swung at Elias's head, but Elias ducked, rolling to the side. The ground shook as Sarnath's punch missed, cracking the stone floor. Elias moved quickly, using his smaller size and speed to his advantage. While Draxir were strong, they were used to brute force combat. Elias had trained in human military tactics, adaptation, strategy, and precision. Sarnath attacked again, but Elias sidestepped, striking him in the ribs with a powerful elbow. The Draxir warrior snarled in pain but didn't fall. The crowd murmured. This was unexpected. The human wasn't losing immediately. Sarnath, now angry, swung his tail, trying to knock Elias off his feet, But Elias anticipated the move and jumped over it, landing a hard kick to Sarnath's jaw. The impact sent the warrior stumbling back. For the first time, Sarnath looked uncertain. Elias wiped the sweat from his brow. Had enough. The crowd cheered, not because they supported Elias, but because they respected his ability to fight. Sarnath roared and lunged one last time. But Elias was ready. He sidestepped, using Sarnath's momentum against him, and drove his knee into the warrior's stomach. With a final, well-placed punch, Elias sent Sarnath crashing to the ground. Silence. Then, a thunderous cheer erupted. Velith, watching from the sidelines, felt something strange in her chest. Admiration. Respect. Something else. She had expected Elias to fail. She had expected him to be weak. But he wasn't weak. Sarnath groaned on the ground, barely conscious. The arena master stepped forward. The winner is Elias Carter. Elias took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He turned to face Velith. Do I have your people's respect now? Velith studied him for a moment, then nodded. You have mine. For the first time in her life, she looked at Elias not as an outsider, but as something more. As an equal. Elias Carter walked through the towering halls of the Draxur royal palace, his boots echoing against the polished black stone. He had won his fight against Lord Sarnath, but the battle for respect was far from over. The Draxur people were warriors, and one victory did not mean they had fully accepted him. Beside him, Princess Velith strode with confidence, her golden eyes sharp and calculating. She had seen many warriors fight in the arena. But Elias had been different. He did not rely on brute strength like the Draxur. He used speed, strategy, and precision. That was not the way of her people, but she could not deny that it had impressed her. You fight like no warrior I have seen, Velith said at last, breaking the silence. Elias smirked. Humans fight differently. We don't just rely on power, we adapt. Velith nodded slightly, as if considering his words. But before she could reply, a deep voice interrupted them. You should not be walking so openly, human. Elias turned to see an elderly Draxur standing near a massive pillar. His scales were a dull gray, and his sharp eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. He wore dark ceremonial robes, the symbol of the royal advisor embroidered in gold across his chest. This was Elder Varzun, one of the most influential figures in the empire. Elias kept his posture relaxed but alert. I take it you don't approve of my presence here, Elder Varzun. The old Draxur let out a low growl, his tail flicking in irritation. Approval does not matter. What matters is survival. And you, human, have many enemies in this palace. Velith frowned. If anyone dares to challenge him again, they will face me. Varzun sighed, shaking his head. This is bigger than a simple duel, princess. The nobles are not just angry about your marriage. They are afraid. They believe that if a human is allowed to take a place in the royal family, it will weaken our empire. They see him as an invader, a threat to our traditions. Elias folded his arms. And what do you think, Elder? The old Draxur studied him for a moment before answering. I think you are either very brave or very foolish. He paused, lowering his voice. And I think you do not realize how deep the danger runs. Before Elias could ask more, a soldier rushed into the hall, his armor scratched and his breathing heavy. Princess, Captain, there has been an attack at the palace gates. Elias and Velith arrived at the palace entrance, where a group of Draxur warriors stood in defensive formations. The gates were heavily damaged, and the remains of an explosion were still visible on the stone walls. In the middle of the chaos stood Lord Sarnath, his body covered in fresh wounds. His expression was twisted with fury, but there was something else. Shock. Elias stepped forward. What happened? Sarnath clenched his fists. We were attacked. A group of assassins, wearing royal armor, but they were not ours. They tried to kill me. Elias raised an eyebrow. Why would someone try to kill you? Zarnath bared his fangs. Because they wanted to make it look like you did it. The realization hit Elias immediately. Someone wanted to frame him for Zarnath's death. If they had succeeded, the entire Draxur Empire would have turned against him. Velith growled. This is a coup. Someone is trying to take the throne by force. Zarnath wiped blood from his mouth. And I know who is behind it. The tension in the air thickened. Lord Zarnath, the same warrior who had hated Elias for being human, now stood before him as an unexpected ally. Later that night, inside a secured war chamber, Elias, Velith, Zarnath, and a few trusted warriors gathered around a holographic map of the palace. Zarnath pointed at one of the noble districts. The attack was ordered by Lord Vergor, one of the most powerful nobles in the empire. He has been against my cousin's rule for years. And now, with my uncle, our king, dead, he sees an opportunity to take power. Elias narrowed his eyes. Then why not challenge for the throne openly? Zarnath's expression darkened. Because a direct challenge would be risky. Instead, he tried to kill me and blame you. If the people believe a human assassinated a noble warrior, they will demand your execution. And once you are dead, Vargor can make his next move, eliminating Velith. Velith's eyes burned with fury. Coward. Elias exhaled, thinking, so what's our next move? Zarnath crossed his arms. We strike first. The room went silent for a moment. Velith leaned forward. You expect Elias to fight your battle for you? Zarnath scoffed. No, I expect him to fight with me. He turned to Elias. You wanted to be part of this empire. Then prove it. Help us crush this rebellion. Elias studied Zarnath's face carefully. Just a day ago, this warrior had wanted nothing more than to see him humiliated. But now circumstances had forced them together. Elias finally nodded. All right, but we do it my way. Zarnath frowned. What do you mean? Elias smirked. You Draxur love brute force. But humans? We use strategy. He turned to the holographic map, already formulating a plan. Velith watched him carefully. For the first time, she saw why her father had chosen Elias. He wasn't just a strong fighter. He was a leader. And perhaps, just perhaps, he was exactly what the Empire needed. The war chamber was tense. The air smelled of burning torches and the faint metallic scent of Draxur armor. Elias Carter stood in front of the holographic map, his fingers tapping against the edge of the table as he studied the battlefield. Lord Zarnath, Princess Velith, and a handful of trusted warriors watched him closely. Zarnath crossed his arms. You say you have a strategy, human. Then speak. Elias looked up, his blue eyes sharp. The enemy expects brute force. If we charge in like they think we will, we'll lose. But if we turn their own strength against them, we win. Velith raised an eyebrow. Explain. Elias pointed to a section of the palace where Lord Vargor's forces had gathered. Your enemy is overconfident. He tried to frame me because he thought it would be easy. That means he believes his position is secure. He won't be expecting a deception. Zarnath grunted. Draxur warriors do not deceive. We fight with honor. Elias smirked, and that's why he won't expect it from you. He leaned in, tracing a path along the map. We split our forces. Zarnath, you lead a fake attack at the front gates. Make it loud. Make it messy. Let them think we're throwing everything we have at them. Zarnath narrowed his eyes. And while I do that, Elias turned to Velith. You and I will take a smaller elite team through the underground tunnels. We'll infiltrate Vargor's stronghold and take him down before he even knows what's happening. Velith tapped a claw against the table, considering. It's risky. If Zarnath's forces fall too quickly, we'll be trapped inside enemy territory. Elias nodded. That's why we move fast. No hesitation. The room fell silent as the warriors absorbed the plan. Finally, Zarnath let out a low chuckle. I don't like deception, human, but I do like winning. He turned to Velith. If this works, I may start respecting your choice of a mate. Velith's tail flicked slightly, but she ignored the comment. She looked at Elias. Let's hope your human strategies work. Elias smiled. They always do. The battle begins. The night sky above Draxur Prime was filled with the sound of war. Explosions shook the palace grounds as Sarnath's forces stormed the front gates. Roars of warriors, the clash of steel, and the crackling of energy weapons echoed through the air. From the shadows, Elias and Velith led a team of 7 elite warriors into the underground tunnels. The passage was dark, damp, and filled with the scent of earth and old stone. It had been abandoned for years, but Elias had studied the old palace blueprints. He knew it would lead them directly under Vargor's stronghold. As they moved forward, Velith whispered, "You trust Sarnath to hold the front." Elias nodded. "He's a brute, but he's a smart brute. He'll give us enough time." The tunnel opened into a hidden chamber beneath Vargor's fortress. Elias signaled for silence. He pressed his ear against the stone wall. Footsteps. Guards patrolling above. Velith grinned, her fangs glinting in the dim light. Time for battle. Elias smirked. Time for strategy. He pulled out a small device and pressed a button. A timed explosion went off at the far side of the fortress. The walls shook slightly, and the sound of panicked shouting came from above. One of the warriors, a fierce female named Zarak, frowned. What was that? Elias whispered, "A distraction. Now their forces will move to investigate, leaving us an opening." Velith's golden eyes flashed with admiration. Clever. They climbed up through a hidden passage, emerging into the lower halls of the fortress. As expected, most of Vargor's guards had left to check the explosion. Only a few remained. Elias moved first. Fast, silent, precise. He grabbed a guard from behind, covering his mouth and knocking him out in one smooth motion. Velith followed, slamming another enemy into the wall with a powerful strike. The other warriors handled the rest. Within moments, the path was clear. They moved deeper into the fortress, reaching the central chamber where Lord Vargor was waiting. The final confrontation. Vargor stood at the top of a stone platform, surrounded by his most loyal warriors. His dark purple scales gleamed under the flickering torchlight. "I was wondering when you would come, Princess," Vargor said, his voice dripping with arrogance. His yellow eyes turned to Elias. "And you, the human who should have died in the arena." Elias smirked. "Sorry to disappoint." Vargor snarled. "You are a disease in our empire, a weak creature who has no place among warriors, but you will not live long enough to ruin us." With a signal, his guards attacked. The room erupted into chaos. Velith clashed blades with a towering warrior, her movements fast and deadly. Elias dodged a sword strike, countering with a sharp elbow to the enemy's throat. He grabbed a fallen spear and spun it, using it to block an attack with swift precision. Zarak and the other warriors fought fiercely, matching Vargor's forces blow for blow. But Vargor himself did not move. He watched from above, his claws twitching as if waiting for something. Elias noticed. He's waiting for something, or someone. Then suddenly, the doors burst open. A second wave of enemy warriors poured in. They had been waiting in ambush. Velith growled, "It's a trap." Elias's mind raced. They were outnumbered. The fight was turning against them. Vargor laughed, stepping forward. "You thought you were clever, human. But in the end, brute force wins." Elias gritted his teeth. His strategy had worked, but only for the first half. Now he needed a new plan. He glanced at Velith. "Think you can hold them for 60 seconds. Velith smirked despite the danger. "Try me." Elias activated his communicator. "Sarnath, you better be ready. We need backup, now." On the other end, Sarnath let out a deep chuckle. "I was waiting for you to ask." Outside the fortress, The real attack was about to begin. Elias gripped his spear tightly, his breathing steady despite the chaos around him. The battle inside Vargor's stronghold was turning against them. More enemy warriors had arrived, surrounding them like hungry beasts. Princess Velith stood beside him, her blade dripping with the blood of fallen foes. The Draxur warriors in their team fought fiercely, but they were outnumbered. Lord Vargor stood on the platform above, watching with satisfaction. "Your little plan has failed, human," he sneered. "You should have never set foot in our empire." Elias smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Funny, because I think you're about to regret underestimating me." Vargor frowned. "What are you talking about?" Elias tapped the side of his communicator. "Sarnath." Now, a deep, rumbling boom shook the fortress. The ground trembled beneath their feet as explosions erupted outside. Then, the front wall of the fortress collapsed. Through the dust and debris, Sarnath charged in, leading a battalion of warriors. His massive blade gleamed under the dim light as he roared. For the Empire. His forces crashed into Vargor's soldiers like a storm, turning the tide of battle instantly. Elias grinned. The real attack had just begun. The turning point. With Sarnath's forces entering the battlefield, the fight became a true war. Velith spun and slashed, cutting down an enemy who got too close. "I hope you have more tricks, human," she shouted. Elias grinned. "Always." He grabbed a fallen enemy's energy rifle, aimed it at the ceiling, and fired. The shot struck a hanging chandelier of metal spikes, causing it to fall directly onto a group of enemy warriors. The Draxur warriors around him stared in surprise. Sarnath, slicing through two enemies at once, saw Elias's action and let out a booming laugh. "I hate to admit it, human, but you fight well." Elias smirked. "I try." Vargor, however, was not laughing. His eyes burned with rage as he saw his forces being overwhelmed. "No," he roared. "I will not let a human and a dishonored princess ruin everything." He jumped down from the platform, landing with a powerful thud. His claws flexed, his muscles tensed. He charged straight at Elias. The duel. Vargor swung his massive sword, aiming to cleave Elias in half. Elias barely dodged, rolling to the side as the blade smashed into the stone floor, sending cracks through it. "Coward," Vargor spat. "Fight me like a warrior." Elias spun his spear in his hands. "I prefer fighting like a survivor." Vargor lunged again. This time, Elias sidestepped at the last moment, bringing his spear up to strike. The sharp edge cut across Vargor's arm, drawing deep purple blood. The noble snarled in fury. "You dare wound me." Elias smirked. "I was aiming for your pride." Vargor roared and attacked again, swinging wildly. But Elias was faster, smarter. He dodged each strike, waiting for the perfect moment. Then he saw it. Vargor overextended on his next swing. For just a second, his chest was exposed. Elias thrust his spear forward. The weapon pierced Vargor's armor, sinking deep. Vargor gasped, his eyes wide with shock. His blade dropped from his hands, clattering against the stone floor. Silence fell across the battlefield as everyone saw what had happened. Elias stepped back, pulling his spear free. Vargor collapsed to his knees. The once proud noble looked up at Elias, his expression filled with disbelief. "Woman, beat me." Elias exhaled, gripping his weapon tightly. "Looks like it." Vargor let out a final, shuddering breath before falling to the ground. Motionless. Victory and consequences. For a moment, no one moved. Then, Sarnath let out a triumphant roar. "The traitor is dead. The Empire stands strong." The Draxur warriors echoed his cry, raising their weapons in victory. Velith stepped forward, looking down at Vargor's fallen form. "It is over." Elias wiped sweat from his brow. "I hope so. I'm getting tired of nearly dying." Sarnath clapped a heavy hand on Elias's shoulder. I still do not like the idea of a human in the royal family. But today, you have earned my respect." Elias chuckled. "I'll take what I can get." Velith turned to the remaining nobles who had supported Vargor. "You have two choices," she said. "Swear loyalty to the Empire, or share his fate." The nobles, seeing no other option, dropped their weapons and bowed. The rebellion was over. But Elias knew this was just the beginning. A new future. Later that night, in the palace, Elias stood on a balcony, looking out over the city. The battle was won, but he knew that gaining the trust of the Draxur would take much longer. Velith joined him, standing silently for a moment. "You saved the Empire today," she finally said. Elias shrugged. "It was either that or die trying." She smirked. "You continue to surprise me, human." Elias met her golden gaze. "And you? Do you still think your father made a mistake choosing me?" Velith was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke softly. "No, I think he saw something I didn't." Elias chuckled. "Guess I'll have to keep proving myself then." She smiled slightly. "I look forward to it." Far above, the stars shone bright over Draxur Prime. A new chapter in the Empire's history had begun, and Elias Carter, the human once mocked by the Galactic Council, was now at the center of it all. The halls of the Draxur Royal Palace were filled with whispers. The rebellion was over, but the Empire was still shaken. Many warriors still doubted the rule of Princess Velith, and even more questioned the strange human who had played a key role in defeating Lord Vargor. Elias Carter could feel their glares as he walked through the corridors. "Why does he still live?" one warrior muttered. "He is not one of us," another said. "He has no scales, no strength." Elias sighed but kept walking. He was used to being underestimated. At least Sarnath had warmed up to him, a little. The massive warrior stomped beside him. "You should not listen to their words, human. The weak complain, but warriors act." Elias smirked. "Oh, I noticed. They liked to talk big, but didn't do much when Vargor tried to take over." Sarnath let out a deep chuckle. "Perhaps you understand our people more than I thought." Just then, the palace doors swung open. A group of noble Draxur warriors entered the chamber, their golden armor gleaming under the torches. At their head stood Lord Karis, one of the most powerful nobles still loyal to the Empire. He was tall, his dark red scales giving him an intimidating presence. His sharp yellow eyes locked onto Elias. "This is the human," Karis said, his voice filled with skepticism. Sarnath crossed his arms. "The same human who helped crush the rebellion." Karis scoffed. "A fluke. I see no warrior here. I see only a fragile creature who hides behind strategy." Elias rolled his eyes. "If you're looking for a fight, just say so." Karis bared his fangs. "A fight? No, human. I challenge you to the trial of the claw." Silence fell over the chamber. Even Sarnath's eyes widened slightly. Elias frowned. "The trial of the what?" Velith entered the room, her expression serious. "It is a sacred duel, Elias, a test of strength, endurance, and willpower. If you refuse, you will be seen as a coward." Elias sighed. "Of course I will." Karis smirked. "Then we shall see if the Empire's new hero is truly worthy." The trial begins. The arena was massive, built into the heart of the palace itself. Thousands of Draxur warriors had gathered, eager to witness the humans' defeat. Elias stood in the center, rolling his shoulders. He was dressed in light battle armor, his spear resting in his grip. Across from him, Karis cracked his knuckles, flexing his claws. He was nearly twice Elias's size, his muscles rippling with strength. Sarnath leaned toward Elias. "This was a mistake, human." Elias smirked. "You're just mad you didn't get to challenge me first." Sarnath chuckled. "Perhaps." Velith stood nearby, arms crossed. "You do not have to do this." Elias met her gaze. "Yes, I do." She sighed. Then fight smart. Do not try to match his strength. Elias nodded. He never planned to. The arena master raised his staff. Begin. A battle of strength versus strategy. Karis charged forward, his claws slashing through the air. Elias barely dodged in time, rolling to the side. The ground where he had stood cracked under the force of the attack. Fast, but weak, Karis growled. Stop running and fight. Elias twirled his spear, keeping his distance. I prefer not getting my ribs broken. Karis lunged again, faster than before. Elias dodged, but this time Karis anticipated it. His tail whipped around, slamming into Elias's side. Elias grunted in pain as he skidded across the dirt. The crowd roared with approval. Karis laughed. Is this all the human has to offer? Elias exhaled, pushing himself up. His ribs ached, but he wasn't done yet. Karis came again, claws raised for a finishing blow. Elias waited. Just as the claws came down, he moved. Pivot. Dodge. Counter. Elias ducked under the attack and slammed the blunt end of his spear into Karis's knee. The Draxir stumbled. Elias didn't stop. He spun the spear, striking Karis in the ribs, then across the head. The crowd gasped. Karis growled, shaking off the hits. A lucky strike. Elias smirked. I'll keep getting lucky then. Karis charged in rage, but now Elias had the advantage. He sidestepped, striking weak points, knees, joints, ribs. The great warrior was slowing down. Finally, Elias saw his chance. Karis lunged for a final attack. Elias dropped low and swung his spear upward. The tip stopped just inches from Karis's throat. Silence. Karis froze, eyes wide. He was defeated. The crowd exploded in cheers. Sarnath grinned. Clever human. Velith allowed a small smile. Well done. Karis stepped back, breathing heavily. Then, to everyone's shock, he bowed. You have earned my respect, Elias Carter. Elias blinked. Wait, that's it. No dramatic speech. Karis smirked. You fought with skill. You won. That is enough. The nobles who once doubted Elias now looked at him with newfound respect. He had proven himself. But Elias knew something bigger was coming. This was just a trial. The real challenge was still ahead. A new threat looms. That night, as Elias sat in his chambers, Velith entered. You surprised them today, she said. Elias smirked. Surprising people is kind of my thing. Her expression grew serious. There is something you must know. While we were celebrating, I received a message. Elias sat up. What kind of message? She hesitated. A warning. His expression hardened. From who? Velith met his gaze. The Galactic Council. Elias frowned. Let me guess. They're not happy that a human is part of the Empire now. Velith's golden eyes darkened. They are not just unhappy, Elias. They see you as a threat. Elias exhaled. Great, just what he needed. The Galactic Council had mocked him before. They wanted him gone. Elias Carter stood on the balcony of the Draxir Palace, staring at the distant stars. His victory in the trial of the Claw had earned him the respect of many warriors, but something told him that his biggest challenge was still ahead. Velith's words echoed in his mind. The Galactic Council sees you as a threat. Elias sighed. He had never cared about politics, but now he was stuck in the middle of an intergalactic power struggle. Heavy footsteps approached behind him. It was Sarnath. You are quiet, human, Sarnath said. Is something troubling you? Elias smirked. Oh, nothing much. Just wondering how many ways the Galactic Council might try to kill me. Sarnath let out a deep chuckle. Let them try. If they attack the Draxir Empire, we will show them our strength. Elias exhaled. I don't think they'll attack directly. The Council isn't stupid. They'll try something different. Just then, A loud horn sounded across the palace. A messenger rushed in. Princess Velith, a Galactic Council envoy has arrived. Elias and Sarnath exchanged a glance. Well, Elias muttered, that was fast. A dangerous offer. The council envoy stood in the grand throne room of the Draxir Palace. He was a tall, pale-skinned alien with sharp eyes and an elegant uniform. Behind him, 2 heavily armed guards stood silently. Princess Velith sat on the throne, her golden eyes locked onto the envoy. Elias stood beside her, arms crossed. Sarnath and several nobles were also present. The envoy spoke, his voice smooth but cold. Princess Velith, I bring a message from the Galactic Council. Velith nodded. Speak. The envoy's gaze shifted to Elias. The council is concerned about the growing influence of this human. Elias smirked. I have that effect on people. The envoy ignored him. The council believes that allowing a primitive species to hold power in an empire like yours is a mistake. It weakens your standing among the galactic civilizations. Sarnath growled. Watch your words, alien. Elias has proven himself in battle. The envoy smiled slightly. We acknowledge his efforts, but the council has a solution, a way to avoid unnecessary conflict. Velith narrowed her eyes. What solution? The envoy turned to Elias. Leave. Return to your homeworld. If you walk away now, the council will not interfere with your empire. Elias raised an eyebrow. And if I refuse? The envoy's smile vanished. Then the council will consider you a threat, and threats must be eliminated. The room fell into tense silence. Elias chuckled. You know, I was starting to think you guys liked me. The envoy's expression remained cold. This is your only warning, human. Choose wisely. The choice. After the envoy left, Velith turned to Elias. You realize they will not stop, right? She said. Elias sighed. Yeah, I figured. The moment I helped you, I became their problem. Sarnath grunted. We should prepare for war. Elias shook his head. Not yet. If we start a war, the whole galaxy might turn against us. We need to be smarter. Velith nodded. Agreed. But what will you do? Elias leaned against a pillar, deep in thought. If he left, the council might back off. For now. But he knew the truth. They wouldn't stop. The council was afraid, not just of him, but of what he represented. Humans were supposed to be weak, insignificant, yet here he was, standing among warriors, earning their respect, shaping the future of an empire. If he left, he would just prove them right. If he stayed, he would show them that humans were not to be ignored. Elias grinned. I think it's time we send the council a message. The message. The next day, Elias stood before a massive holo-communicator. His image would be transmitted across the galaxy, directly to the leaders of the Galactic Council. Velith and Sarnath stood beside him. The entire empire watched. Elias took a breath, then spoke. To the Galactic Council. I got your message, and here's my answer. No. Murmurs spread through the council chamber across the stars. Elias continued. You call me a threat, but the only reason I'm here is because your so-called great empires allowed corruption and war to spread. A traitor tried to take this empire by force. I stopped him. He pointed at the camera. If that makes me a threat, then maybe you should ask yourselves why. Are you afraid of me? Or are you afraid of what happens when more people like me stop listening to your lies? The council members shifted uncomfortably. Elias smirked. I'm not going anywhere. If you want me gone, you'll have to try harder. With that, he ended the transmission. The Draxir warriors erupted in cheers. Velith turned to Elias. You just declared war on the council. Elias chuckled. No, I just told them the truth. Now let's see how they react. Sarnath grinned. I think I am starting to like you, human. A new beginning. That night, As Elias stood on the balcony again, Velith joined him. "You took a great risk today," she said. Elias shrugged. "Wouldn't be my first time." She smiled slightly. "The council will come for us." Elias looked at the stars. Let them. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was fighting for something bigger. And he wasn't alone. As the Draxir Empire stood behind him, one thing became clear. The galaxy would never be the same again. The human had changed everything.